Dr. James Frame is your lead medical director. Dr. Frame is a prior paramedic, so he knows exactly where you are right now, long before he became a doc. And he's been a doc for many, many years in various environments. Been teaching, medical school, testing. I mean, you name it, this man has done it. So that having been said, I asked him to take up a little bit of EMS ops as one of the topics tonight, because in our review of examinations, both the National Registry and of your final exams, seems like EMS ops is still your weakest area. And I think it's the area that most paramedic students tend to kind of skip over, thinking they already know the content, they already know the answers, and then they fail miserably in that category. So that is why I asked Dr. Frame to bring up this topic and do a review in various areas of EMS ops. So that having been said, I'm going to turn this over to you, Dr. Frame. Dr. Frame, are you there? You may be having some, I noticed his camera was cutting in and out. He may be having some technical difficulties there on his end.
All right, let's try it again. Testing 1, 2, 3.
We can hear you great now, sir.
Okay, good. All right, so I got a problem with the headphones. Good to know. Anyway, my name's Jim Frame. I am your lead medical director, and as Jane has been gracious to point out, I'm one of the writers of questions for the National Registry. So today we're going to talk about an area which tends to be a bit weak for EMS students, and yet one of the easiest areas to compensate. So over the next 2 roundtables, we will be discussing the National Incident Management System as it pertains to EMS first responders, whether you're a paramedic on a fire department, a private agency, a 911 agency contracted through a fire department, or whether you're a helicopter EMS, military, or forest preserve service. This is all going to come into play for you for this National Registry exam. As you recall, or as you may recall, each section has anywhere from 10 to 15 questions that are asked, maximum 150 questions. You're given 2.5 hours. It's an adaptive test, which means if you get 2, 3, or 4 questions right in a row, they start going into harder questions. When you get one wrong, it starts back and tracking into the easier questions. At least questions that over 75% of the National Registry takers, which has been close to 3.3 million people now, have taken, and the questions have been validated. So if 3.3 times 3/4 of them, if 2.4 million people got the question right before and only 1.1 got it wrong, then it's a valid question. It's a valid question from the standpoint that it hits the 75% mark. So anything that hits the 95% mark or over is too easy of a question and is thrown in to the question mix just to kind of give you a little boost of confidence and such to find out exactly where your break-off point is with your knowledge based within statistical reasoning. So all of this is a great way of saying that on EMS operations, you're going to have about 10 to 12, maybe 15 questions. They're going to be relatively basic questions, and it's one of the easier sections of the National Registry. Unfortunately, it's the 3rd most failed area of the National Registry, and we cannot figure out why. So for this next 2 cycles coming up, in other words, for the next 12 months, if you plan on taking the National Registry within the next 12 months, then the areas that we're going to cover this session and the next roundtable on November 30th with me will be covering the national or the NIMS 100 and 200. The NIMS 700, 800 tend to be less tested. This is really a focus on basic EMS operations. More times than not, unless you're in a very rural area, or if you're in a remote area of a particular state, such as Texas, Maine, Alaska, such like that, where it could be 2.5, 3 hours to get to the victim, 2.5 to 3 hours to get them down to a competent medical center. These remote areas and such tend to have EMS protocols and services where much of this that we're covering today will be expanded into NIMS 700 and 800. So that covers your air medical, helicopter, fixed wing plane, special environments such as in Alaska or Maine, cold environments in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Forest Preserve Service, terrain and hot weather, and then some of the other problems that arise with particular habitats such as toxidendrums, toxic plants, dangerous wildlife, and as the such. It'd be hard for me to teach somebody in Kansas City about stingray bites and dangerous fish, shark bites, same as it would be for trying to teach somebody in Texas all about polar bears and some of the problems that happen there. So many of the 700, 800 level stuff has to do with that. The NIMS 300, 400 are pretty specific for fire service, hazardous environments and such, things that have to do with material ops, whether they're awareness, defensive operations, or offensive operations such as the hazmat technician. So today, mostly a coverage of NIMS 100 with a smattering of 200. And today we're going to touch a little bit on definitions. So it's not going to take long to go through definitions and a couple of introductory concepts that you will have to know for the National Registry. They're going to ask you a simple question. What is a contact hazard? The answer is going to be A, B, C, or D. You got to know the definition. So this is the good part about NIMS, is that it's not going to be hard. It's just kind of memorizing some definitions. The bad part about NIMS is that you have to memorize some definitions. There's no easier way around it. Much of this stuff is common sense. If you've been doing well in the class, well in the course, you should be able to reason your way through some of this. But there is some of this stuff where the obvious answer just isn't quite there. It becomes much more subdued of an answer that makes sense once you know the answer, but you can't reason your way through some of this. It's just going to have to be good old-fashioned flashcards, making yourself type card, flipping it, knowing the definition, moving on. Now, so that you don't reinvent the wheel, there are some good flashcard quizzes that are online. You can start with Platinum Planner, which gives you some sample questions. But for the most part, when you Google, Yahoo search, whatever you use, if you use EMS operations, NREMT, and then look for flashcards, Quizlet are two of the big ones, you'll find that much of what is about to appear on the National Registry actually appears in one form or another on those flashcards. The problem with those flashcards, there could be anywhere from 50 to 100. And to cover a topic such as EMS operations may be a total waste of time. So to help you, I've summarized the important questions that are most likely to appear on your National Registry exam here in this lecture. Now, we use the Limmer O'Keefe books here because much of the EMS operations tend to favor Limmer, and subsequently the questions and answers come out of there, although all the material is covered in all of the EMS textbooks. But for EMS operations, I prefer the Limmer because it tends to simplify things for us here a bit. So this recording will be made available on the PERCOM website. Should you ever have to refer back to it, make sure that you refer to it before the examination when you're looking for that real quick 15-minute refresher on definitions and rudimentary questions as they relate to EMS operations. Okay, so let's begin. We look at the first definition, and when you're dealing with EMS operations, you're dealing with scene size up. And the first bullet point there is going to be the answer on the National Registry in some form as this. We use the language out of Limmer to get you acquainted with the definition, but it may be a summary of it. So appropriate strategies and tactics to manage an incident, such as, and then they'll list a couple things, or to the following things, the following items are part of a scene size up. Information gathering for personal and patient safety, determination of additional resources, mechanism of injuries, interventions, and changing conditions. It'll appear on your scene size up as a combination of all three of these bullets, or it just may be a single bullet. So it's important on this slide to remember that when you pull up on the scene of any incident, whether it's a single family home with a single patient inside the home sitting on the couch with shortness of breath and difficulty breathing, okay, that's one scene size up. You pull up on the scene of a multi-vehicle accident, multiple victims, fire department's on the scene, incident commander is taking command, they've directed you to a vehicle, or everybody's favorite, you're first in on one of the worst accidents you've ever seen in your life, and there's 6 cars involved and there's people screaming all over the place, and you're first in. And so now you do a scene size up, a triage, and then you radio in and say, send me the world, make 11,000 phone calls and send me everything you got, a helicopter, 2 engine companies, a truck company, heavy rescue, whatever it is that you have to ask for, including additional ambulances. That's all part of the scene size up. So as you and I talk right now, you get a flavor for what scene size up is all about. It's getting on the scene and automatically deciding, what do I need? What do I got? Is there anything that could hurt me or kill me? Is there anything that can hurt or kill the patient? Do I need additional resources? And where is the safest place to park this vehicle? If you're driving an engine company, you probably got a department policy that says, turn the vehicle this way, block this many lanes of traffic, the front of the vehicle points in this direction. Or you could be the first ambulance on the scene, where you're looking for placement of your vehicle, including a cushion of safety. So about 100 feet, 150 feet, don't use those numbers directly, but a safe distance away that gives you a cushion of safety. We'll talk about cushion of safety here in a little bit. So the NIMS, the National Incident Management, what happened here? Come on. The NIMS system really is a system that was designed right after 9/11. President Bush had this in as part of the Federal Emergency Management Agency that was created as a part of the Department of Homeland Security. And the NIMS system allows for guidelines and common terms to allow multiple agencies to work together. And let me repeat that because this is a definition. NIMS is NIMS provides the guidelines for common terms and procedures to allow multiple agencies to work together. Okay, go back one. One of the definitions that you'll see on the exam, and this one is pretty much consistent with the test in all of its forms. There are some things that we test on some exams. As you sign up for the test, the questions come down out of the cloud of 4,000 questions. You get 150 of them that load up in your computer. It's random. But there's certain questions that appear in every single exam because it's that important that it shows up, that we know that everybody knows at least the foundation of knowledge that's required to be an entry-level paramedic. So when we look at chemical substances, when you look at hazardous materials, whether you're responding to a truck fire, a hazardous incident spill, a tank car fire from a railroad incident, or a fire within a building that contains chemical substances, there's going to be one thing in common to all of them by law that you should be looking for, and that's the material safety data sheet, the MSDS. And the MSDS is a document that gives you information about the substance that you're up against. It's going to include physical and chemical properties. It's also going to include the health, safety, fire, and environmental hazards of the substance. Of these 3 bullet points, it's probably going to be an all of the above answer. So be looking for these bullet points to make sure that you understand what an MSDS does. Now, we'll go over chemicals throughout in the rest of your course, and we'll go over how to treat certain chemicals, but you should know that in order to treat for these certain chemicals, life will be a lot easier for you and for the patient if you just look for the MSDS, pull the substance, look at the sheet and say, this is how we're going to treat it. And most of those, if not all of them, are going to have a very specific treatment for the patients, whether it's washing them with water, whether it's to avoid water, whether it's not to mix it with certain other chemicals, or whether it's just ventilation management, neutralizing substances, such like that. So when we talk about the treatment, they'll supersede any medical protocols that you may have. You pick up the MSDS, you can call into medical control and say, hey, look, we got ABC chemical here and we got the MSDS and it's telling us to do this, this, and this. It would only be an idiot doctor that would refute the MSDS. These are very well crafted, well drafted documents that has to do with the very specific treatment of a medical patient exposed to that chemical. They'll tell you if there's a danger of cross-contamination, what the persistency is, what's the volatility. In other words, the health, safety, fire, and environmental hazards of that particular substance. So if you're a chemist or you got a chemistry degree or you have some sort of biological background, you may be able to determine what the treatment may be for very common substances. For instance, placard number 1203, going down the street in a tanker car. Well, 1203, if you ever sit behind one long enough, or you pull up the hazmat sheet on it, the MSDS, or any other Chemtrek looking type information sheet, you'll find that 1203 is gasoline. Well, gosh darn it, when it comes in contact with the skin, it's going to hurt. What are you going to do? You're going to wash it off. So some of the easy stuff is going to be easy, but you're going to run into some, you know, beta-beta-boo hydroxybutyrone with, you know, 6 alcohol OH molecules attached to the aromatic ring. Okay, a lot of that you're not going to know. I'm not going to know it. I have a chemistry major. So the MSDS is going to be very helpful. So in this whole time that I've been telling you about the MSDS, know the 3 bullets that are right in front of you and be looking for it anytime that a patient has been involved in any type of industrial, DOT, or other type of hazardous material incident where the MSDS will be available to you. So that's going to be the second one. We get into vehicle operations, and I'm jumping around here a little bit because, like I said, this is an introduction, and when we talk about the next lecture, when we talk about these things, it'll be a little bit more following one to the other in a very clean way. So EMS operations, vehicle maintenance, vehicle inspections, driving, etc., are all going to be very important part of EMS operations. And one of the things that they talk about EMS ops is vehicle inspections as you come in for your early morning shift. And you're going to have to know that. Now, we'll cover that next time that we meet, about tire pressure checks, windshield wiper checks, signals, etc. It's going to be probably an SOP on the department that you belong to, but it's also going to appear on your National Registry exam with high confidence. In other words, most of you, if not all of you, are going to run into the question about what do you check for at the beginning of a shift. And it's going to give you 3 real obvious things, and the 4th one's going to be something stupid like, gee, open up the battery cap and look to see what the level of sulfuric acid is. Okay, since all batteries are now self-sealed, that's going to be the obvious one out. But they're going to give you easy stuff, and this should be intuitive, but still review it, because it's going to include windshield washer fluid, radiator fluid, check the oil, check your directional lights, check your emergency lights, check the radio, tire pressures, and then of course all your equipment in the back of the box. Now, 2 things that are going to show up on your exam. The first one, you're looking at it on the slide. It's hydroplaning. And hydroplaning is a yeah, let me get that over there. There we go, here you are. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Okay, so I got to keep the chat box open in case one of you has a question. Don't want you to think I'm blowing you off on that. The other one is going to be approaching an intersection. A third one is going to be about speed of a vehicle. And let me cover that in a second. The first 2, hydroplaning and intersection approach. Hydroplane, know the definition. This one is going to be invariable. 95% of you are going to run into this question. It's the effect of water lifting a moving vehicle off the road surface. You're going so fast that the vehicle actually starts floating on the water, and you're losing contact, at least significant contact, with the surface. So if you're on one of our real famous Texas roads here, and everybody likes to do 75 miles per hour while being 6 to 8 inches off the bumper of the car in front of them at 75 to 80 miles per hour. They like to do that in the wet weather as well, or snow. Any one of you that might be from the north, I'm initially from Chicago. realize pretty quickly what hydroplaning can be when it comes to freezing rain, heavy rain, or snow. In other words, you've lost all your ability to utilize friction to stop your vehicle. Subsequently, you float on top of the water. So driving through water at high speeds, and we've all done it, you hit the water and it's like either hitting a brick wall, or you come to a very, very significant change in speed from high velocity to low velocity, or you skim right over the top of small puddles and you start to slip and slide a little bit. That's hydroplaning. So that's the first one. The second one's going to be intersections. When you're approaching an intersection, no matter what kind of intersection you're approaching, stop signs, no stop signs, red lights, turning lanes, etc. You go to the left as far as you can. Try not to go to the right. Certainly don't go up the middle of two lanes, because that's a bowling alley and you don't want to go up the bowling alley. So you're going to stay to the left as much as you can. And number two is you're going to stop before entering the intersection with lights and siren going, but you're going to stop before entering the intersection. Particularly true when you're going against the red light. Now remember something, I want you to copy this one down. We're going to cover it again next, whenever we're meeting again, November 30th. But state laws regarding emergency vehicles only allow you certain privileges. They don't allow you to violate the law. If it's a speed limit of 60 miles per hour and you're doing 65, 70, okay. As long as you got good control of the vehicle, visibility is good, dry pavement, that's going to be a privilege that you're going to be allowed. Nobody's going to give you a hard time about it. Do 70 miles per hour when it's raining, snowing, ice, such like that. I don't care how many lights and sirens you got on. If you have an accident, it's your fault. Liability is yours. Emergency vehicle is not a license, okay, to violate law or violate common sense. One of the questions you could have, and the reason why I didn't really include it on the slideshow here is because it's not tested that often, but liability still lies with the driver of the emergency vehicle if a law is violated to the detriment of other people that result in personal injury or personal damage, where a reasonable driver in the same or similar situation would not have done that. So again, 60 miles per hour when it's icy, we don't do it in our real cars. Why would we do it in an ambulance? Or worse yet, for some of you guys coming that are brand new into the fire service, if you're driving an engine company or a truck company, man, those things are 24, 26, 30 tons, as in 2,000 pounds a ton. And subsequently, the unsafe operation of a vehicle is the number one cause of firefighter deaths, responding to and from scenes. So as you can imagine, your city or your agency that you're driving for, when they find out that the accident was your fault, irrespective of lights and sirens, the city's going to be liable, or the agency you're working for is going to be liable, which means watch your contracts very closely, make sure they don't have one of those indemnification clauses that say that if you are grossly negligent in operating the vehicle, we have a right to throw a lien against you and recover the cost of the entire damages as a result of the car accident. So just watch yourself. In other words, common sense, reasonable care. We know that it's 60 miles per hour. Your siren's only good for about 12 feet in front of you. If you're greater than 12 feet in front of you at 60 miles per hour, sound cannot travel more than 1,100 feet per second. If the other car is doing 60 miles per hour as well, It's not going to overtake the car until it gets within 12 feet of it. You got to understand Doppler effect and physics and sound waves to understand that concept. Doesn't make much sense when you listen to it the first time. But once you get into the physics of sound waves and what they call a Doppler effect, you'll understand that if you have your siren on and you're coming up to an intersection, stopped vehicles can probably hear you, but moving vehicles probably won't, especially vehicles moving away from you. Subsequently, if they're not paying attention to a rearview mirror, they're not going to know that you're there. And so it could be putting both of you in a bad situation. So when it comes to speed, we note that for a 5-mile stretch of road, if you do 60 miles per hour versus 50 miles per hour, the 60-mile-per-hour vehicle will probably reach the end of 5 miles about 30 to 45 seconds faster than the 50-mile-per-hour car. You're only talking less than a minute. So don't put yourself at risk. Again, you may or may not see that question. You'll definitely see intersection. You'll definitely see hydroplane, but you may or may not see speed. But if you do see speed, safe, reasonable care will probably win the day for you. The cushion of safety, and this one probably is a little bit blurry for you. These Limmer slides here, I gotta slap him around a little bit, but we have an instance here where the cushion of safety, it's just an adequate distance. I think we touched on it when I first got online with you. If you're first on the scene of a major car accident, you want to park your ambulance about 100, 150 feet from the accident scene, get out, go walk to the accident scene, and hope that your ambulance is big enough to stop any car that might be coming in at 60 or 70 miles per hour. Most 6-car pileups occur on interstates where the speeds are pretty high anyway. Subsequently, the further you have the ambulance back away from the car scene, the better it's going to be if that ambulance gets hit, which is why we like to use older fire engines that were made of the older steel and I-beams that weigh 26 tons that can stop most vehicles pretty quickly, certainly stop them within 50 to 100 feet. Sometimes you'll see a fire engine parked way back almost a quarter of a mile, just because of the high-speed traffic coming through there. And if it's late at night on a Saturday or New Year's Eve, you'll want to stop the intoxicated driver from piling through the engine and pushing the engine into the car accident scene, putting all of you guys in danger. There's been very many instances, and even when I was a fireman, we had a car pile into the back of an engine company. Back then, when I was a fireman, we had firemen that rode the back tail of the engine before they started moving them all into the cab. And of course, both firefighters were killed when they got plowed into. These are some of the dangers that you run into when you don't even ask for any danger. It's just being out there makes you a target for some strange reason. So here we go. As a driver, you're responsible for maintaining a safe distance, ensuring the safe operation of your vehicle, and also the proper placement of your vehicle. So there's, on the 3 bullets here, or 2 bullets, you got 3 concepts. The cushion of safety, which is concept number 1 and probably the most important here. That's the one that's tested most often. And that's the first bullet, cushion of safety. But as a driver, this is a true statement sitting here. And it's got 2 parts to it. You maintain a safe distance while you're operating your vehicle, and you're operating your vehicle safely. And so in the courtroom, should you be happen to be the driver who survives the accident and you're up on the witness stand and they ask you, how are you operating your vehicle and how is it that you piled in 3 cars? And then they put about 4 paramedics up on the stand at different times as expert witnesses, tell them what kind of idiot you were for driving your vehicle in an unreasonable, unsafe manner that resulted in the accident. That's the way in a courtroom that we establish negligence or gross negligence, is by expert testimony. We put a doctor up there when a doctor commits malpractice. We put a firefighter up there when a firefighter commits malpractice. You don't hear about those suits very often, but they do exist. And you hear about drivers of emergency vehicles being put up on a witness stand to prove negligence and gross negligence when we put other EMS driver operators on the witness stand to establish that what you did was inappropriate, unreasonable, and unsafe, and therefore you're liable for the car accident. So no matter how glamorous it was back in the 60s and 70s when I was a fireman and we went hair on fire, hell bent for election 70, 80 miles per hour, there's no excuse for that kind of vehicle speed anymore. It's not going to save the patient's life. Very rarely does speed ever do that, but it does kill you and your partner, or God forbid, other people that didn't want to ask for you to be on the road, behave it in that manner. So that's your cushion of safety, that's your safe distance driving, and that's your safe operation of your emergency vehicle. Let's skip back again to ChemTrack. This one invariably occurs on every single exam. What is ChemTrack? What is the phone number of ChemTrack? You'll want to look up the phone number. I forgot it, and I didn't think to put it on the slide here. Ask Limmer to put it on the slide when he sent me the revised slides. But the phone number for ChemTrack tends to be an 800 number, I think. So anyway, ChemTrack is the Chemical Transportation Emergency Center. It is the poison control of hazardous materials and how to handle the environmental, safety, health, and fire part of it. Just like poison control, we'll tell you what the antidote is, what you should be drinking. Should you be at the hospital? Can you just drink milk? Nah, don't worry about it. In the hospital, we call poison control and we get an idea, hey, this person took 4 substances and the combination of them is giving us a patient picture that looks like this. That's poison control. When you got a chemical that's out there and you're first on the scene and you've got your responding apparatus coming in that you've already called for help, then you have dispatch get on the phone to ChemTrack and patch you through, or if you got your phone with you, you call ChemTrack, say, hey, this is firefighter so-and-so, paramedic so-and-so. I'm at this location with this vehicle, and here's the placard number, or here's the MSDS. What am I looking at? And ChemTrack will walk you through everything that has to be done. So ChemTrack, Chemical Transportation Emergency Center, so they're going to ask you one of 3 ways here. The phone number for ChemTrack is the Chemical Transportation Emergency Center, and their phone number is, or what is ChemTrack? Well, it's the agency that assists first responders, emergency responders, firefighters, in identifying and handling hazardous material transport incidents. Know the slide and know the variations on the slide. Yep, there you go, 800-262-8200. I love it. Thanks for doing that for me. Okay, specific distances. We're going to try to stand back from that because standard operating procedures for each department may vary. Conditions will vary that. I may be 100 or 150 feet back in a 26-ton fire engine, but I may be 200 feet back in an ambulance, only because it's easier to push around ambulances. I may push that engine back 300 feet, 100 yards in icy conditions or nighttime conditions where it's raining, and yet I may back it up to a quarter of a mile or more if traffic is coming over a hill and coming down into a valley kind of area there, and the accident is at the bottom of the hill. So we avoid, at the National Registry, when we create these questions, we avoid specific questions as to an exact number of feet you should be behind an incident. If you arrive on a chemical incident, park upwind and uphill. You don't ever want to be downwind from a poisonous gas, and you don't want to be downhill from a poisonous or flammable liquid that's trickling down the hill that's going to be around your feet here in a second. It's going to turn everybody into a barbecue. Always park uphill and upwind. That's the only specifics that we have. But again, and I want to reemphasize this because that was a great question. Is there a specific distance? The answer is no. They're going to list 2 or 3 distances, and then the fourth answer is going to be depends on conditions, road conditions, location, such like that. That's going to be your answer. Everything that I just mentioned about weather, position, presence of hills, liquid, flammable, gas, poisonous, small ambulance, big fire truck. This is all going to come into factoring as to how much distance you put between the apparatus and the accident scene. And thanks for the phone number, by the way. Let's see. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Okay. So another definition that you have to know, there's going to be 4 definitions. In other words, is there, you're welcome to, Andrew. Is all 4 going to appear? And the answer is one of the 4 is going to appear. So contact hazard is something that appears more than anything else, but we'll touch base on the other ones. You have inhalation. You have contact through absorption. Okay. You have injection.
I think we temporarily lost him. Give him a second to see if he can get back in here, guys. In the meantime, why don't we do a roll call? Everybody type in. I see Randy, Chris, everybody type in. Let me know you're still here. Yep, Randy. Deborah, are you still here? Yep. Jeanette. Jeanette, are you here, girl? Hello, Jeanette. If you can't get your chat room thing working, Jeanette, you can reach over and unmute yourself by putting your cursor up on the line where your name is. And there's a button that says unmute. And you can speak. Kara, I see you're here. Andrea, you're here. The only one I'm looking for is Jeanette. Jeanette. I'm not sure what's going on there. Jeanette, if you can hear me, but you're having trouble with your ability to communicate on here, you can email me privately and let me know that you were still here so that I know that you heard me. Hopefully Dr. Frame would be back, but usually when something like that happens, the internet has cratered. So let's just give him a few minutes and see if he comes back. I'm going to pause the recording.
All right, let's run our roll call again. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks, Kara. Yes, Andrea. Okay, yes, we can. All right, so in all the preparation that I didn't charge up the battery here. I apologize. All right, let me get back into this little show here. Okay, so we have contact hazards, and okay, good. All right. All right, let's see where I left off at now.
We just don't see your screen yet, Doc.
You what?
We do not see your screen yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to it. Mhm. Oh, don't do that. Can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Contact is okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, so you can see me. So let me get the share screen.
We see your Zoom screen and where you're got the sign in and stuff. So just bypass that and just open your presentation back up from the bottom.
Boy, oh boy. How
Don't
come
even worry about.
it was easier getting on the first time?
Yeah, just reach down there and it was a PowerPoint. I saw your PowerPoint open at the bottom. Just you should be able to click the icon on the very bottom of your screen and bring it back up, I would think. There you go.
See it now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. Sorry about that, folks. I'll do better next time. So anyway, contact hazards. Okay. Any chemical whose primary route of entry is through the skin. We're going to talk about respiratory, which is inhalation, and you'll be talking about ingestion and contact hazards, and then port type that gets through the mucous membranes and such. But the most often tested one is contact hazard. And the contact hazard is a primary route of entry through the skin. It's going to ask you, what's a contact hazard? And you're going to say it's the primary route through the entry in which it's through the skin. It's going to give you the other three definitions as well. It's going to give you mucous membrane exorption. It's going to give you inhalation. It's going to give you ingestion. It'll give you the definitions for those four. You got to know if this is one of these memorization ones. You just got to know it's common sense. If they got something that says inhalation and it says, well, you get that by inhaling it, well, duh. Good for you. You got one right. Only got to get 74 more right, and you're good to go. At the same time, it may give you the definition that says any chemical substance which is absorbed by inhaling or absorbed by the skin is called 1, 2, 3, 4, obviously contact hazard. And for the next class, we'll make sure that we cover the other three hazards as well. So examples, and you do not have to know these examples. There's favorable chemicals and there's dangerous chemicals. Liquid cyanide, formaldehyde, ethanolamines, dioxins, benzophenones. These are all dangerous. And subsequently, I could put a powdered cyanide on me and it's not going to cause any problems. But if it comes in contact with liquids such as sweat or If it comes in the liquid form or worse yet, the gas form, and it comes in contact with my skin, it'll kill me. Yet the powdered form won't. They're not going to make those fine distinctions, but they are going to ask you an example of a contact hazard is, and then the answer is going to be a chemical substance which can cause you harm by coming directly in contact with your skin, or inhaled, or ingested, or through the mucous membranes. So know the 4 types, specifically know the definition of contact hazard. But the 4 examples I have here are examples of harmful chemicals, but there's about a gazillion of them. So this is not an exhaustive list. Favorable chemicals, aloe vera, coconut oil, herbs, certain herbs, are all favorable. Neosporin ointment, bacitracin, sylvadene. Anything that you put on your skin to help heal or calm an inflammation. Steroids is another one. So coconut oil, aloe vera, sylvadene, just know that everything that comes in contact with the skin is not harmful. It is a contact. But the contact hazards are ones that are harmful when they come in contact with the skin. I think I beat that one up to death. All right, here we go, cross-contamination, and then we're going to wrap this up. Now, this is a chemical which passes from a contaminated person to a contaminated person. So what's the easiest explanation? Well, welcome to 2020. COVID-19 is a virus, a biological agent that passes from an infected person to a non-infected person, and then gives that person the disease. Or I come in contact with a dangerous chemical such as chlorine or arsenic or cyanide or something like that, ammonia, and then I then go to a second person, and without washing, rinsing, or otherwise getting out of the environment, I contaminate this person. That's why we have a hot zone going to a warm zone. We spray you down with water to wash off radioactive material, brush you with scrub brushes and soap, whatever it is that we need to wash off of you so that you don't cross-contaminate other people who have not been in contact with that chemical, or protecting ourselves from a biological agent by using N or R or S95 masks or SCBA or some sort of purification filtration system so that I don't get COVID-19, and then 5.2 to 11.6 days later, giving it to somebody else after I start showing symptoms. That's cross-contamination, or better known as spreading the virus throughout the entire world. Each person has been cross-contaminated. So it can relate to biological agents. If you come in contact with such as anthrax, where a powder gets on your skin, we don't wash you off and you come in contact with another person, comes in contact with another person, again, contact hazard for yourself, but cross-contamination when you give it to the next person. So know the definition that it can pass from a contaminated person to a second person, and it can be a chemical or a biological agent. Okay, and it then spreads to and causes the disease or the same injury to an unprotected contact. So 3 components to this definition. Persistency. What does persistency mean? It means persistent. In other words, it sticks around for a long time. It doesn't stop. It stays in your face. It stays on your skin. It stays on surfaces. It stays where you put it, and it doesn't go away, at least not without great effort. So the duration of a chemical agent that stays on a surface before it evaporates is going to be part of its persistency. If anybody ever used an alcohol pad on a person's skin prior to sticking them with a needle or giving them a shot or drawing blood, you'll know that when you put alcohol on a person's skin, it is not very persistent. It stays long enough to brush away and kill some of the bacteria that's on the skin, but it evaporates pretty quickly. If you spill a little isopropyl alcohol on a metal surface and then wipe the surface, you'll see it go from wet to dry fairly quickly. This is not a very persistent chemical, isopropyl alcohol. That's why we use it in the medical profession, so we don't rub somebody's arm with it and let it stay there for a year. But yet some chemicals will stay on a surface or will stay on a person for a long time. So when we use betadine to paint iodine on an arm, turns the arm brown there, it can take up to several hours for that brown to completely disappear. It can also take some chemicals that are found in its liquid form that spill on a surface. If the surface is not porous, but solid like cement, plastic, etc., if that chemical stays there for a while, then that chemical has prolonged persistency. And we refer to that persistency, that sticking around for a long period of time. You'll read that in your ChemTrack or in your hazmat books that it will say persistency high, persistency 1 to 2 hours, persistency immediately gone, that kind of stuff. You may or may not see it. We only really worry about it for chemicals that stick around a long time. They have high persistency. And it's the same thing with volatility. Now, I threw that in on my own down there. The volatility is something that is a characteristic, a chemical characteristic, a physical hazard characteristic of a particular substance. So if there's gasoline spilled and I throw a match on it, what's its volatility? Pretty damn high. It's probably going to go poof and burn up everything around you. That's a highly volatile chemical, whereas another type of chemical, I could throw a match on it and it's not going to explode. That would be low volatility. But volatility does not just have to do with fire or heat application. A volatile substance can be pretty dangerous if you add sodium to water. You could get an explosion, which is why chemistry sets that they sell in hobby stores or that you get in mail order, the sodium actually comes in an inert glycerin type vial. Doesn't come sodium inside of water, because sodium in water will cause an explosion. If you take chunks of sodium, pure sodium, not salt, not sodium chloride, pure sodium, and you throw it into the water, you can get an explosion. Easy way to fish. You can bring a whole bunch of dead fish up pretty quick. Not very sporting, but it gets the job done. But that's an example of the type of volatility that can occur that does not relate to heat. Two chemicals coming together can go poof. So we look at volatility from the standpoint of if it's mixed with this, or what happens if I apply water. What do firemen like to do? We like to pull hose and we like to spray water. Do all chemicals get water? No. So before you open up that nozzle to start putting out fires and such, and I know that can be a tough decision, especially if there's people trapped, but before you go opening up water and putting everybody around you at risk, you got to know what the chemical is that you're up against, because if you put water on certain chemicals, you're going to make everything not twice as bad, probably 10 times as bad. That's what we refer to as volatility. All right, and I thought I saw somebody flash up here as far as questions. Let's see. Check.
Yeah, Dr. Frame, Deborah asks, what are common, highly persistent chemicals that we may deal with?
Chlorine and ammonia are going to be your two most dangerous that are commonly found in transportation accidents or industrial plants. Those would be the two most famous examples. Chlorine gas was used in World War I, just to give you an idea. It's called mustard gas, but chlorine in its pure form is heavier than air, so it settles down into valleys. That example I gave you earlier about parking upwind and uphill, that's one of the reasons why you go uphill. You don't want things running down on you, but certain gases, poisonous gases such as ammonia and chlorine, are heavier than air, and they tend to sit in low valleys. Subsequently, their persistence, they're highly persistent. In other words, they won't go away for a couple hours. On the World War I battlefields, when they killed a lot of people with chlorine gas and such, it was because all the soldiers were in foxholes and trenches. You launch the chlorine gas, the mustard gases, and it would cover the battlefield, but it would settle down into trenches or foxholes, or even shell holes made from gun shells that hit artillery shells. Subsequently, it drove the soldiers out of the trenches and out of the foxholes, and then made them a whole lot easier to shoot. So that was one of the more wicked, inhumane examples. However, chlorine and ammonia are still used in certain chemical processes because they have low volatility. You're not going to get them to ignite, but high persistence. And since they're both inhalation and contact hazards, okay, we have to be very, very aware of them. Ammonia can cause reactions with other substances to create certain plastics and molds. So can cyanide. Chlorine, as you know, is used in septic systems, swimming pools, and such like that. They can form a chlorine gas under the right circumstances, but usually when added with water, all they do is dissolve. But once in a while, we use chlorine gases for stabilization of volatile substances. We know that some substances, such as arsenic, such as cadmium, such as some of the heavy metals, that are very unstable in air, hydrofluoric acid, fluoride for one of them. Subsequently, when we put chlorine gas with them and keep them enclosed in a container, they are no longer volatile. So ammonia, chlorine still have applications in the industrial process, and they still have to be shipped by truck from one place that makes it, such as Union Carbide. And once they make all of this in the big bottles, then they send it to the particular chemical manufacturers, who then use it in their industrial processes. And you'd be surprised how much stuff out there that we use around our households, in our cars, airplanes, and boats that actually have an ammonia or chloride basis to it. It's pretty amazing. If you get into the study of occupational medicine and exposures to these particular types of chemicals, you'll understand the importance it is to the economical production of materials that we use in everyday building materials. It's pretty impressive, but those are a couple of examples. Yes, it is terrifying. That's why I want to be one of the first ones to move to Mars. There's not a whole lot going on up there when it comes to hazmats and chemicals. Even hydrazine, fuel, oxygen mixtures, and some rockets and some aircraft that we have are highly carcinogenic, so they are contact hazard, but you don't know about it until 10 years later when you're dying of metastatic skin cancer. There's just some things in the environment that, yeah, it's pretty terrifying, and that's an understatement. Okay, I think I bored you enough with the introductory material here. Know the definitions that I outlined. They will, or most likely will, appear on your national registry. The definitions that I outlined on the slides, please make sure you know those as well. And I'll see you on November 30th, where we will pick up with preparing for the ambulance call. Any questions before we leave?
Let's do a last roll call. Andrea, how about you? Any questions for Dr. Frame? Nope, no questions. Chris, how about you?
Nitroglycerin, yeah, nitroglycerin volatility, that's an excellent question. Nitroglycerin in its medical form is 1/1,000,000th of the dose that you find in medicinal purposes, but yet when you look at that from a chemical standpoint in a liquid form, not nitroglycerin drips obviously, but nitroglycerin is used for high explosives. Nitroglycerin is so volatile that even a bowl full of this stuff, if you gently bump the bowl or gently bump the table, an explosion occurs of disproportionate intensity. I mean, you can put 1 quart of nitroglycerin in a bowl, bump the bowl, and you'll get the equivalent of 14 sticks of dynamite. It's that volatile. All you got to do is bump it, which is why when bomb makers, like in the Middle East, some of the, I don't want to stereotype anybody here, but some of the places that are famous for making bombs in basements, pipe bombs for one, you want to mix a gel in with the nitroglycerin, and you slowly infuse the gel, and then the gel hardens. That stabilizes the nitroglycerin, keeps the molecules apart. So when you finally do give it a detonation, which is called a blasting cap, the nitroglycerin part explodes, and a stick of a nitroglycerin gel is equal to, again, 14 sticks of dynamite. I mean, it's more economical to have 20 of these things wrapped up, which will give you the firepower of hundreds of sticks of dynamite. And of course, we use that same gel with nitroglycerin. We used to in our nuclear weapons when we go to fuse hydrogen with helium. When you fuse those two hydrogen atoms together, even hydrogen and hydrogen, you do so with a symmetric explosion of nitroglycerin and gel. And so as soon as you get one fusion, one hydrogen molecule collides with another one, there's your fusion reaction, and then you make a whole city disappear. Nitroglycerin in its pure form, by bomb makers, have to take towels, and they put the towels inside the bowl, and they let the towel absorb as much nitroglycerin as it can, and then they slightly tilt the bowl and drag the towel out onto a wax paper, which is then rolled and then placed within pipe bombs. And then they put a bunch of those together. Now, this is if they can't get their hands on C4 plastics or some of the other things that are out there. This is kind of a poor man's way of making a bomb. That's why so many of them blow up their fingers, or worse yet, blow up their entire houses before it even gets to where they want to explode the bomb. That's nitroglycerin.
Deborah, you asked a question about dates. Dr. Eschelbach was doing the 24th, and Dr. Frame's on the 30th, and you actually reminded me in my posting net that I still don't have Dr. Phillips' dates. So just watch the student forum, but Dr. Frame will be back on the 30th. There's another doc on the 24th.
You know, it is amazing, Randy, how we make some medicines. People that used to have congestive heart failure, Socrates in that period of time, people that had congestive heart failure, they found the plant, if you chewed on a certain plant, it made the heart failure actually better. That is the foxglove plant. and you chewed on the leaves and you felt good. Well, what we found out was inside those foxglove plants is digoxin, digitalis. Digitalis was the older treatment in the 60s and early 70s for congestive heart failure. We still use digoxin in certain instances for people that have ventricular tachyarrhythmias, although these days cardizem, amiodarone, and adenocard and all the other happy stuff out there tend to do a lot better job. But that's how we discovered digoxin. And that again is botanical medicine. It's actually pretty interesting stuff, but you're right. There's a lot of stuff out there that we've made just by experimenting. All right, if anybody, glycoside, that's exactly right. Poisons the AV node. The old Ulbane before digoxin came about was another poison. And what it is it temporarily poisons the AV node and only allows maybe 1 out of every 3 or 4 beats to come through. There's a lot of interesting background to many of these botanical medicines, and it's pretty interesting stuff. Okay, I got a date with all of you on November 30th. I hope to see you then. And Jane, thank you for the opportunity to talk with our class.
Thank you, sir, for being here. And everybody, I hope you have a wonderful evening.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.